Thank you for being here today. We're privileged to have with us Joel Fitzgibbon MP and Warwick and Terry Horwath. And Joel, you across this situation with Warwick and Terry and Horwath Drilling?
Thanks, Max. I am, and I'm not only here to support Terry and Warwick, who have lost money through no fault of their own, but the hundreds of shareholders in my own electorate who had no knowledge of suspicious circumstances, if that, around Doyle's Creek, but invested in a listed company expecting to get a reasonable return. And as a result of state government action, they've effectively had their assets confiscated from them, losing money. Now, some of my constituents may have only lost $20,000. That might not be a lot of money to go to Spurgeon or other members of Parliament, but to a struggling family, that is a lot of money. And these people who invested could have had no idea whatsoever of any allegations around the original issue of the mining lease. They were just looking for an investment opportunities to support their families. And of course, people like Warwick and others, contractors who have been damaged, could have, of course, not had any idea of these allegations, entered into contracts in good faith to do work on the site, and of course, as a result, have lost substantial amounts of money. Now, this might be dealt with in the courts eventually, but it shouldn't have to be like that. The New South Wales government should acknowledge its mistakes and find a way of compensating these very many innocent victims.
And the New South Wales government can do that, can't they? In Parliament, they've amended the Mining Act once. Can't they amend it again?
Well, state governments, the sovereign governments with enormous powers, not powers given like the federal government has, but basically powers to do whatever it likes in areas like this. Now, this is not the deepest or darkest of Africa. People should be able to invest without a state government coming along and expropriating their assets. And if a state government has the power to expropriate assets like that, then they certainly have the power to compensate those who have been adversely affected. I don't know what the form of compensation looks like or what the mechanisms would be, but I do know the world is watching us now because there are international investors who have been caught up in this dispute as well, including those from the United States of America. When people invest in developed, wealthy nations like Australia, they expect governments to protect their investment, not undermine it and in fact confiscate it, as has been the case in the New South Wales government.
And doesn't the international situation impact on our trade agreements with Japan and the US? Isn't there an opening there for the federal government to step in?
Well, there's certainly some disquiet, particularly in the United States. And it's funny, in Australia we're having this dispute about investor-state dispute mechanisms. People are concerned that by entering into these arrangements, courts might be able to override decisions of the Australian government. But while I share people's concerns there, the idea of having investor-state dispute mechanisms and free trade agreements is that if Joel Fitzgibbon is investing in the deepest of Mongolia or in Central Africa, I'm hopefully protected from governments making decisions like the one made by the New South Wales government right here in wealthy modern Australia. So people, I can understand why people want those protections in free trade agreements, but they should not be necessary for someone investing in Australia, because we are a modern wealthy nation and we wouldn't expect here for governments to be precipitously just making or introducing legislation which confiscates people's assets and leads to the hardship being faced by Warwick, Terry, other contractors, and of course my constituent shareholders.
Terry, what are your thoughts?
I always thought, Joel, we were a nation that abided by the rule of law, and the rule of law doesn't seem to apply here. It's a shock to I think most people I've spoken to about it. And I think the New South Wales government has got to seriously review their position on this, and if they don't, I think the people of New South Wales, and in particularly the Hunter, will voice their opinion in the very near future.
Terry, how do you feel about this? How's it affected your family?
Well, it's affected me personally, obviously, but my children all worked for us and their spouses worked for us, and we're having 7 grandchildren. It becomes a worry because what's going to happen to them? As they get older, is the same thing going to occur? It's caused a lot of stress, a lot of mental anguish. You know, like, you don't do anything wrong. So if we're not doing anything wrong, and we were just working with contractors, and they come along and take this lease, what else can they do? They destroyed the company, so obviously no income coming in. My children then had to go all get jobs elsewhere, their wives, the whole lot. So it's been very difficult for not just us, but everybody in our family. And I employed nephews and everything else.
Howard Drilling Max was not a fly-by-night shelf company. It was about to celebrate its 25th year in operation. As my wife had said, there was 10 family members employed by the company, and there was an additional 10 permanent employees outside of the company, and we also relied on a number of casuals, depending on the workload. But I feel that unless there's change, this could happen to anybody because the precedence has been set, particularly in New South Wales.
Joel, any message for the New South Wales State Government?
Well, I think our priority here is those who have been injured. Warwick, Terry, my constituent shareholders, and that should be the first priority for the New South Wales Government. But we all have a stake in this because Australia is a small island trading continent with limited savings, and we are desperate for foreign investment. And if people are going to look at Australia in the future and wonder whether their investment is next, because the New South Wales Government hasn't sent a clear message that this was a mistake and that it has now fixed it, then that's going to impact on the broader Australian community. So my clear message to the New South Wales Government is fix this. Fix it on behalf of the small shareholders that I represent in my electorate. Fix it on behalf of the independent contractors who have been injured, but fix it in the name of the Australian economy, because we can't have people looking elsewhere in terms of their investments because they remain unsure about Australia, and they remain unsure because the New South Wales Government once got it wrong and they never corrected the situation. They never tidied it up.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay.